Okay, so hopefully this is the first of many parts in a series explaining the different components of the historical investigation, the internal assessment for the history IB course. The plan of investigation is the first part. It is worth 3 points. It's easy to get 1 point. It is very difficult to get 3 points. So the goal here should be that the majority of students get 2 points, no one gets 1, and a fair number of you can get a 3. There's 3 components in the plan of investigation. The first component, the easiest one, is the question, the controversial question. In all historical investigations, there is a question that is debatable that will be answered through the course of study. The question must appear in the section. The next component is the scope. The scope details with the greatest degree of specificity possible exactly what is going to be analyzed in order to attain the answer. In the examples, you will better realize the degree of specificity required. And the final component of the plan of investigation is the method, which is detailing how you will encounter the answer with respect to maybe what means of documents you'll be consulting. Hopefully, again, with a great degree of specificity, rising above just generally mentioning books, websites, blogs, encyclopedias, etc. So these 3 components make up the plan of investigation, and we'll kind of walk through some samples so that you can better realize how they actually play out in real pieces. So let's go with the weak example first, and then we'll go with the strong one. So, weak example. This is an example of a weak plan of investigation on the siege of Leningrad. It's weak for several reasons. Number 1 is that it does not have the question inside of it. Now, hopefully your teacher can provide you with paper copies of this sample as well, because this is a sample that all members of the history department at AST have been familiarized with. But in this sample we see kind of a general description of what the siege of Leningrad is. We see that it goes on for 900 days, that the people are suffering. We see something that looks like it's close to a question, like this sentence here that says, this investigation will examine the siege of Leningrad, specifically the role Russian culture and spirit played in the outcome. So it seems like that's what the student is trying to investigate. However, this does not reach the degree of explicitness that IB is looking for. The actual question should appear in question form in the piece. Fortunately, the reader does realize generally what is being investigated here, but there's no specific mention of what parts of Russian culture or what components of Russian spirit, I would imagine it's perseverance, are being examined here. Furthermore, there's absolutely no mention at all in terms of what sources are going to be consulted, even generally or specifically. So the examiners, what they gave this, when they moderated this score, or this document, this internal assessment, they gave it a 1 out of 3 because the research question is absent. The methods and scope, it says there are developed, definitely not thoroughly developed though, because most of the section is just filled with background information. Believe it or not, from the internal assessments that I've seen, even though you might believe that the sample is quite low, it's very easy to produce a plan of investigation that only scores 1 out of 3 points. So, now going to the strong sample. Okay, now this, you'll notice, is actually much shorter. It's only 105 words, but the degree of specificity is far greater. This plan of investigation is what I would call a low 3 or a lucky 3 because it also does not include the exact question, but the examiners nonetheless gave it the full points. In terms of the scope and the method, it is extremely specific, very concise, tightly organized, and it goes forward to outline the sections of the summary of evidence, which would be the next component. So the key sentence to look at here is, to determine the extent of the contribution of Trotsky's leadership to victory, the investigation will examine the following things. And then it creates a list. Each item in the list will be a category in the next section through which facts will be made aware to the reader. So it says the military reorganization of the Red Army, that's 1. The impact of war communism, that's 2. Problems inherent in the white-green opposition, that's 3. The inadequacy of foreign aid, that's 4. So there's 4 parts, and later when we look at their summary of evidence, they divide it up into exactly those 4 parts. So what this is this is actually the scope and it's the method. this author has told us exactly what pieces or categories of information will be investigated in order to ascertain the answer to their question, which is what was Trotsky's role in the Russian Revolution. So that's the degree of specificity that is necessary. To give one more verbal example, is if you were examining the question, was it necessary to drop the bombs, atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, your scope and method would include such specific categorical pieces of information such as the war fatigue that U.S. soldiers were experiencing after already fighting a war in Europe, the stubbornness of the Japanese high command, their inability or unwillingness to surrender, the financial investment contributed to atomic research. All of these would be categories or chunks, pieces of information that you would include in your answer. That's basically what it means to have the scope. So, though we saw the high sample, we saw the low sample, we got the basic description. Hopefully you got paper copies in class. I think that that summarizes what really is the plan of investigation. I'm just going to show one more thing, I guess. I'm going to show what the moderator said about the strong sample. In the strong sample, they gave it 3 out of 3, and basically what this says here is that it's what I already told you. It's extremely concise, it organizes the following section, and it's possible to have a successful plan of investigation in really just over 100 words. So you don't even need to use the full 250.